So we're jumping back into Jnana Yoga, which is Bhakti Yoga with reason. It's actually not Bhakti Yoga with reason, but I think that's kind of I think Thakur was trying to move us in that way, kind of seeing it that way, Bhakti Yoga with reason, with understanding. Because of course Thakur tells us to take our jnana and to tie it to the corner of our dhotis, or basically put it in your pocket. That it should inform your love of God, which means that it keeps you from becoming one-sided. It keeps you from just becoming sentimental, because renunciation has to always be there, discernment always has to be there, and those are the specialties of Jnana Yoga. And so by using those things, when you feel it undoing your bhakti, then back off a little bit and remind yourself that the silence of the Jnani, the inner silence of the Jnani, is the presence of the beloved. And to know that the inner peace of the Jnani is the love of the beloved, the absolute unchanging love of the divine. And so when we read the Jnanis talking about those things and all of that, we always translate it into our language of the heart for the bhaktas. Because in Thakur's own words, I don't want to be a dry sadhu. I want to be a loving ladhu. I've got the ladhu part. just have to work on the loving part. And so with that in mind, let's jump in here. He's got his question right away. And it says, and what about unselfish desires? So Maharaj says, after desiring, they're talking about the attainment of desires from last week. And he says that the fulfillment, or living for the fulfillment of desires, is going to give you a limited sense of life, a limited sense of achievement. And what's even worse, the hardest part for me when I was waking up from living for desire was the realization that living that kind of life makes you a giant parasite. That if you're living just for enjoyments and just for taking from this world what you can get from it, you're basically a human-sized parasite, just sucking on the planet, trying to get your enjoyment out of it. And when you start to understand that that's the nature of your life, and thereby the nature of kind of what you think you are, that was a startling moment for me, and definitely has helped in turning away from living like that, living for this desire. And so here Maharaj is pointing out that this living by desire is going to keep you in a very small world, the world of five, the world of your five senses. So the source of your knowledge is never going to be bigger than the five. And so our questioner says, well, what about unselfish desires? Maharaj says, when you desire the common good, the whole world desires with you. Make humanity's desire your own and work for it. There you cannot fail. Right? What a beautiful way. This is again is the teaching of Swami Prabhupada. That the only problem with selfishness is that we think our self is small. And so our selfishness serves a very small aspect of the world, of ourself. And so he says that you have to broaden that sense of self to include more and more people. And I've shared this before, but it's a wonderful piece of gold for us. He says that for the householder, that happens through family and through relationship, that you expand. You're alone first, and you've got your selfish desires in life. Then you get a husband or a wife, a partner. And that partner now becomes a compromise for you. You have to now not just consider your own needs, but your ego has to expand to consider the needs, wants, and desires of two people. and then that family begins to grow, whether with children or with other relationships. And as that circle grows, your sense of self expands. Okay, now I take in the needs of my children, and now I take in the needs of their friends, and then ultimately they grow into a larger group and get married and have their own kids, and your world is ever expanding. And the householder path expands ego in that sense. It breaks down the barriers and makes you a push and push and push to become the size that you really are, the size where everybody is your child, everybody is your mother, everybody is your father, everybody is your partner, and to see the world that way. And he contrasted that for the monastic life. He was talking to me in particular about it. And he would, because I had asked him why I had to be so mean to my family. I said, I don't understand this whole idea. It's like, why do I have to, do things that cause so much pain to my family? And he said, yes. He said, but see, that won't be forever. And he said, the final result of it is that everybody becomes your family. He says, right now you can only love your family with the love of family. But he says, when this is finished, you will love everybody with the same love of your family. And he said, so for the monastics, they push everybody away until they get some clarity in their mind about their identity and about what they are. And then slowly you bring everybody forward to the same degree. You march everybody into your internal circle. So the monastics is through that external renunciation, and for the householder, it's that internal renunciation with external expansion to become ever bigger in the way that you love and the way that you act. So he says, these unselfish desires, it's nice that he doesn't challenge the notion of unselfish desires, but makes a universal teaching out of it. Desire the common good, desire what the whole world needs, desire the best for everyone, and think about it as you live. Don't just think about your own desires and your own needs. Train yourself to begin to think about walking into a room full of people and immediately looking for ways that needs can be met, looking for ways of serving, looking for ways of being helpful in the world. And train yourself like the Peace Pilgrim, who said that she saw every moment as an opportunity for service, to give service, and that she lived her life in waiting, like a butler standing at the edge of the dining room, scanning the table to see who needs more this, less that, a plate taken away, a spill cleaned up, whatever it is, to live in the world as the butler of the divine, where you're just standing there waiting for someone to spill their drink. So you can instantly go and be helpful. All right. That's really what he's talking about. So when you desire the common good, the whole world desires with you. Make humanity's desire your own. All right. So pick the desires that are best for everyone. Pick the desires that are helpful to the most number of people. And it's funny because all of this ties together. I get a little overwhelmed when I start thinking about these things, because they just start matching up with all these other ideas that are presented by Scripture. But this notion of this internal expansion, this living for the whole and not for our own self. There you cannot fail. All right. You want a fail-proof life? This is a fail-proof life. Expand your desires beyond the benefit of yourself, your own body and mind, and you're living a fail-proof life. Questioner: well, humanity is God's work, not mine. I'm concerned about myself. All right. Well, there's honesty. That's the first step in spiritual life. Be willing to say out loud your truth. Don't hide it, but also understand there's room for improvement, right? I'm concerned with myself. Have I not the right to see my legitimate desires fulfilled? They will hurt no one. My desires are legitimate. They are right desires. Why don't they come true? Maharaj. Now, first I want to talk about that because that's a disposition. That's a state of mind that requires a lot of thought to come to that arrangement. And it sounds so true. It sounds so American, actually. This is a wonderful. this this is definitely an American devotee asking a question of a sadhu. Just this idea, like, okay, well, that's God's business. That's not mine. So there's that absolute ignorance of us being the divine. That these hardest questions that we ask God all the time. God, why do you let the world go hungry? That's a very challenging question because it's not a question for God. It's a question for you. Why do you let the world go hungry? Right? And so any of these hard questions that we have for God, why is there so much suffering in the world? The real way to ask that question is, what have I done today to alleviate anybody else's suffering but my own? And so this is the way that a Vedantist works to see the world. The world is your responsibility. You are the divine. You are the presence of the beloved in this world. And so to embrace that and to begin seeing it that way in a joyful way, which actually comes quite naturally when you start expressing your own nature. It's catching. It inspires you and drives you to more. I'm concerned with myself. Yes, indeed. That's because of our lack of faith. We're always terrified. I know most of us are not aware of our terror because it's buried pretty deep down there. But that's the fundamental experience of light as a body mind, is fear. Vivekananda says that that's the first thing that happens when you think yourself separate from the whole, separate from the divine. The first thing that happens is you become afraid. And then you become concerned about yourself, right? And the problem is that in that state of fear, which is coming from the idea of being body and mind, your solution then is to become concerned and protective of body and mind, which kind of drives you into more fear because the body mind can't take care of you. The body mind needs you to constantly take care of it. So he says, I'm concerned with myself. Have I not the right to see my legitimate desires fulfilled? You see, this my right. It's my right. As soon as you start worrying about your rights, your life is going to become a struggle very quickly. It's going to become ugly very quickly. And because rights are not properly talked about when you talk about my rights. Rights are only properly talked about when you talk about our rights. Us all together. What rights do we have that benefit the whole, that benefit each other? We can't talk about rights in a selfish way, like, it's my right to sit here as long as I want to. One time, this whole conversation was not a good, not necessarily a good story on my part, but long ago when I was still in college, there was this, we were getting on the bus and it was rush hour. It was 5 o'clock. I just leaving campus. And there was big crowds at the bus stop across from San Francisco State, and everybody wanted to go home. And there was a woman there who considered herself handicapped. She could walk and she could function, but she considered herself handicapped. And when that bus door opened, she unabashedly elbowed and pushed her way through that crowd. I'm handicapped. It's my right. Get out of my way. Let me on this bus. And just being the rudest, person. And I won't tell the whole story because it really reflects very badly on me. But nonetheless, this notion of pushing your way through this crowded world, demanding your rights, is not the way. It's important that we all watch out for each other's rights, that we all watch out for each other's safety and each other's interests. But to run around the world with this tone, You know, taking care of humanity is God's business. I'm concerned with myself. Don't I have the right to fulfill my legitimate desires? Having no notion of the trap of desires, having no notion of the slavery involved in desire, that we then rally to protect our desires and to justify our desires, you know, as opposed to understanding that there's no freedom in that. There's no peace of being in that, and that this rush in the world is what's driving us to the brink of destruction. This parasitic relationship we've had with the material world, not understanding it's our manifestation, but thinking that it's our food, is really quite problematic. So this is really coming straight to the front here. My desires are legitimate, and if in Vedanta, we don't often think my desires are legitimate, but we do often think, oh, my desires are small. It's just a small thing. Oh, this isn't a big deal. This is just something small. Or my desires are common. They're the desires everybody has. So we have different ways of talking about desire in a way that makes it look like it's not an emergency. It's like it's not a problem. Oh, it's an innocent desire. Oh, it's a small desire. Oh, it's a little thing. But it's a relationship with desire that you're talking about. And so if some desires are little, small, and insignificant, who's deciding that? And when is it being decided? And why is it being decided? Why would you feel like you would have to justify desires? And ultimately, is that going to help you? So this is a real call, as always, anytime we get in the scripture. It's a call to do some sensitive thinking, and to open your heart and be willing to get scratched a little bit, be willing to get poked a little bit. Let these things hurt you a little bit, so that you can move beyond them, so that you can be free from them, so you can learn from them. There's a verse that I'm trying to figure out right now in the Isha Upanishad, where it says that the worshippers of Vidya go to a place of blinding darkness, and the worshippers of he says the worshippers of avidya go to a blinding darkness. The worshippers of vidya go to an even darker place. And I read that, I was like, what is that? And then the next verse, it kind of talks about how both are necessary. This is an undigested take on it, because I still don't feel like I've grasped it or understood it. But in there, he talks about it's the sadhu who's taken them both and understood the necessity of both. That avidya is what leads us to vidya. And so without avidya, we would be forever lost, because avidya is what causes the suffering and pain. And that suffering and pain that comes from that is what trains us to understand there's attachment involved. There's wrong thinking involved somewhere. And so that, in an essence, I think at this point, at this moment today, I think the idea is to understand that there is really, in essence, no avidya for the spiritual seeker. Because whatever you pursue with the presence of the beloved within you will keep you honest, and you'll see, oh, wow, that causes suffering. Oh, wow, that causes pain. That causes fear. That causes insecurity. That causes hunger. Through your discernment, which gets activated through the suffering of avidya, that is what leads you to the light. So in essence, avidya becomes vidya for the spiritual seeker. You learn from it, you grow from it, you're changed by it. And so this willingness to suffer, which is a Christian specialty, actually, in their scriptures, in a beautiful way, but they definitely have turned it into a specialty of suffering in this world being something that leads us to righteousness, leads us to the divine, leads us to the solution, little by little. So, don't I have the right to see my desires fulfilled? They hurt no one. My desires are legitimate. You see, in this "they hurt no one" kind of argument is also a little strange, because they're hurting you. So you're discounting yourself. It's like, well, it's not hurting anybody else but me. Isn't it my right to hurt myself? All right. Yeah, but not in a healthy way. it's it's not a healthy thing to accept pain in your life that you're causing yourself, even though it's not causing pain to anybody else. And desire itself is pain, because even when it's fulfilled, it's momentary. It's hunger. It's a constant discomfort. And some of the more profound desires, the greed and the lust, the problem with them is that they grow. The more you feed them, the more you want, and the more desperately you want it. And then the late stages of living a life of desire like that is an intense devaluation of life itself. You kind of wake up to the notion of like, what is the point of all of this? Why? What is the meaning in this? And if you've lived materially, I mean, living through the senses, living through desires, uh, life does become meaningless. Life does become material, and there is no point to it. You know, you can make one up, just like everybody does, at the beginning. But in essence, there's nothing there. The thing that makes life valuable is your identity as love. That's what makes life beautiful. Your identity as wisdom is what makes life profound, makes life deep. Your very existence. That one I always just get caught on, because it's, to me, that's the biggest one. And it's the one you can really say the least about, because it's something we understand the least. What is this existence? What does it mean to exist? So these are the desires, the desires for manifestation. Those are the healthy ones: to manifest love, to manifest wisdom, and to do it with your existence. Which, what does that mean, to do it with your existence? That means do it now, because your existence and the now are the same. And so everything that you do is in the now. So you shouldn't do things in the future. You shouldn't do things in the past. You should be here, be present, be aware, and manifest. Open those gates inside. My desires are legitimate. They are right desires. Why don't they come true? Maharaj, desires are right or wrong according to circumstance. It depends on how you look at them. It is only for the individual that a distinction between right and wrong is valid. This is wonderful. This is wonderful. So your notions of right and wrong are only beneficial to you. They don't necessarily have to be enforced to everybody else around you. You pay attention to your life. You pay attention to your philosophies to the extent that you stay true to them. Keep hypocrisy out of yourself. I find a lot in me that the more noise I make, the more tendency to hypocrisy there is. The more teaching you do, the more chances that you're not living up to it, right? And so you can sit there, and there's two ways to do that. It's just not pay attention to that and just put more energy into the teaching, which is the wrong way to do. Or it's just to sit there and understand, good Lord, Mother, what a tangle this is. And you do your best and go forward. You just keep doing your best and going forward. But you keep your nose to the grindstone, which means that allow yourself to feel and be aware of your fault, so that pain can set you right. That pain can lead you in the right direction. Don't get a callus where you need sensitivity, right? So it's only for the individual that the distinction between right and wrong is valid. So that's why don't go finding faults in others. This is the root of what Mother was teaching. Finding faults isn't your business. Judging isn't your business. Going out determining what's right and wrong from somebody else's perspective is not your business. Right and wrong is your ladder. Right and wrong is your scaffolding to paint your house, to paint your life, to correct your life, to grow and aspire, become large. And if somebody asks, wow, what a great house you have, what a great life you have, what a great character you have, how do you do that? why, then the doors are open and you can do all the sharing that you want about your ideas of right and wrong and whatnot. As soon as you're asked, right? This is something Prabhupada, again, people like it when I talk about it. So I for sure share anything all of these things that come up. But I remember after I'd been in the monastery for like 8 years, I was talking to my father on the phone, and he was giving me a hard talk. He was like, "Look, I understand that you wanted this life and that you're doing this." He says, "But what have you become?" He says, "You're coming up on 45 years old." And he says, every time I talk to you, you're either cleaning a toilet or washing a dish or cooking a lunch or weeding a garden. He said, when are you going to become a teacher? When are you going to stand up and be something? You know, you get a lecture like that from your dad, you start questioning your life. You're like, that's a good question. And so I went to Swami Prabhupada, and I just was sharing with him, you know, like what my father had said and how I was feeling about it, what I was going to do about it. And he told me something very beautiful at that time. He said to me, he says, see, this is the world's view of a teacher. He says, don't think about being a teacher. You're not a teacher because you say you're a teacher. You're not a teacher because you have a degree or because you have a job. He says, in Vedanta, you're a teacher when you live a life that inspires people to ask you about it. He says, you're a teacher when people come to you for teaching. And I thought, wow, that's revolutionary and lovely, because there's a deep truth in that. We love God. We live a life of love for the beloved, for the divine. And that should infect us. That should fill us. And we begin to love others. And when people start seeing that and start asking, wow, how did you become so loving? How do you stay in such a sweet space all the time? You know, or I appreciate you so much. You've been there for me so often in my life, and I just don't have anybody else in my life like that. That's when teaching happens. That's when you have, that's when, what do I say? You know, it's religion doesn't spread because you go out and hand out a bunch of pamphlets or because you reach a lot of people with your message or any of those things. Religion happens when a single person loves God, when a single person loves truth, loves beauty, loves being, and sees it and honors it as sacred in everyone and everything around them. That's when religion grows. And that's the type of religion that we want to grow, you know. But again, it's that whole thing. We don't have to worry about that. Our concern is to love the beloved, to love ourselves, to have a healthy interior that's always in a stable and contented state, regardless of what the moment seems to offer as far as conditions go. Right? We accept all conditions and we thrive in all conditions and we go forward. So desires are right and wrong according to circumstance, which means they're part of the relative world. They're part of the change. It depends on how you look at them. It is only for the individual that a distinction between right and wrong is valid. The questioner, well, what are the guidelines for such distinction? How am I to know which of my desires are right and which ones are wrong? He says, in your case, it's nice. So it's not a general teaching. In your case, desires that lead to sorrow are wrong, and those which lead to happiness are right. But you must not forget others. Their sorrow and their happiness also count. Right? So it's a wonderful teaching. How do you know if your desires are right or wrong? Well, ultimately, as a Vedantist, we know that desires don't make you happiness, don't bring you happiness, and they do bring you sorrow. I guess they can bring you some sense of happiness because they allow that bliss of the self to manifest every now and then when the desire lessens. But all desire is the veil, the veil of Maya. To desire anything except what you already are and what you already have is not helpful. I remember Swami Prabhupada kind of joking with me. He wasn't, well, he was sort of joking. Because he says, we were talking about making the whole world your own. And I said, well, practically, how does that work, Swami? And he told this funny story. And he said, see, sometimes when you go to a store, you think that you want to take things home with you. You think that you want to buy these things. And so you buy them and bring them home. But he said, why do you do that? He said, when I go to Nordstrom's, I already own everything in the store. I can put anything on that I want to, and I can wear it and walk around in it, and I can dance in it, and I can play in it, and then I can go pick something else on and put it on and play with it and dance with it. He says, why do I need to own it? What is this me and mine that makes things better? He says, just imagine that all of these stores are all of your different closets where you keep all of the things that are already yours. And just like you have to go to your closet to take out your outfit of the day, so you have to go to Nordstrom's to put on that pair of shoes or to put on that hat. So like that, he says, just a perspective. The whole world is your own. Just learn how to live in that freedom, how to see it as your own. And let this desire that means you have to attach the label me and mine to everything around you. This is all ours for all of us. So pay attention inside. Initially, yes, pay attention to what leads to sorrow and what leads to happiness. Good idea. But after a while, you're going to start asking, what leads to peace? Because the happiness that desire fulfillment leads to is a composition, which means it's going to have to be constantly maintained. If fresh flowers on the dining room table make you happy, you're going to have to go get fresh flowers for your dining room table every single day of your life for the rest of your life. Are you prepared for that? So it's like that. We come to the understanding that desires and their fulfillment, regardless of the outcome of that fulfillment, isn't the way. That we have to find a peace. We have to find a contentment, not a happiness, not an elated state. We have to find a place of contentment and peace. And that only comes when desires disappear, right? So we don't want to go to battle for desires because that's what causes war. We don't want to go to battle for happiness because that's what causes other people's hunger. So this is what he's saying here. Keep that expansion happening. When you think about your desires, think about them on the scale of the whole. How is this affecting everyone? How is this affecting, the people around me? What about their happiness? What about their inner peace? What about their well-being? And that's the way to bliss. That's the way to fulfillment in this life, is to live according to those rules, the elimination of me and mine. So their sorrow and happiness also count. Questioner. Results are in the future. How can I know what they will be? Yeah, and this is part of that living in the future, which, who was it? I think it was Eckhart Tolle, made me quite aware of what it is to live in the future. That living in the future is anxiety. That's where nervousness comes from, anxiousness comes from. It comes from living in the future, wondering what's going to happen, or, oh, is this going to happen, or is this going to come to pass, or, And I think a lot of times in our spiritual life, we live in the future. All of us have an imagined day in the future when our spiritual life becomes perfect. We realize God, right? And so our practice becomes about the future. Our practice becomes about this imagined day of perfection. But there's not going to be anything different on that day from this day. And so the thing that you're looking for doesn't need the passage of time. What it needs is something now, some opening, some letting go, some freeing up of your space inside, right? So don't let your results be in the future, especially in your spiritual life. That's why I was sharing yesterday with Peter that my practice right now is assumption. That I'm not a seer. I'm not a knower of God in that sense. And so for me, when I sit for my meditation, my tendency from growing up is to sit there and and understand how unworthy I am and how ridiculous it is that someone like me is sitting here trying to do anything, spiritual along these lines. And I let go of that. I assume that I'm here because Mother has invited me here, and that we're having tea together because Mother wants to have tea together, and that I sit here in her presence because Mother has made me worthy of her presence. And I sit here in my freedom and my purity and my enjoyment of her company because she sees me as a toddler. She doesn't feel the need to punish me for the icing on my lips from the cookie that I stole. That she's my mother. The beloved is all knowing and knows everything about me, and yet has invited me. Right? And so we sit and enjoy the now in our meditation. That's what meditation is. Swami Vivekananda says, that religion is not about denying yourself enjoying the enjoyments of life. He says religion is not about that. He said religion is about teaching you how to enjoy life. Right? And so in our practice, the joy should be dominant. You read through the gospel, look at how many times the word laughter is mentioned in the presence of Ramakrishna. There's so much laughter going on, and so much joking going on, and so much playfulness going on in the presence of the Master. Who is this God that you think you're sitting in meditation with? He's a playful, mischievous, funny, very, very witty, beautifully intelligent, wonderful lover. And if that's not our experience in our meditation, in our prayers, then we don't know who we're talking to. We don't know who we're communing with. Because all of that is bliss. All of that is joy. All of that is a wonder, and all of it is now. It's not in the future. We don't live our life for heaven. We don't live our life for realization. We live our life for love. And that love is only now, right? So results are in the future. How can I know what they will be? Maharaj, use your mind. Remember, observe. You are not different from others. Most of their experiences are valid for you too. Think clearly and deeply. Go into the entire structure of your desires and their ramifications. They are a most important part of your mental and emotional makeup and powerfully affect your actions. Remember, you cannot abandon what you do not know. To go beyond yourself, you must know yourself. And this isn't necessarily in some transcendental, mystical way. This is very much in just learning your interior world. It's funny how little attention we actually pay to the machinery of the internal world. How aware are we of the patterns in our mind that are constantly repeating? Some of them for good, some of them for bad. But we always think that we don't recognize them. We don't see them happening. When step one to a particular state of mind happens, we as spiritual seekers need to instantly be aware of that. Like, oh my God, there, look, this pattern has started. I don't like the outcome of this pattern. I abandon it. I renounce. I'm free. I'm not going that direction. I'm not going to let this thought lead to the normal next thought, which leads to the normal next thought, which leads to an action, which produces a condition, which produces a state of mind, which is miserable. I'm not going to do it. And so become aware of everything about your internal world. So he's saying, use your mind, remember and observe. You are not different from others. So this is a good teaching. Yes, because boy, definitely if you grow up in this country, you're definitely inundated your whole life with how unique and special you are and how different you are. And we have this part of the cultural aesthetic is this savior complex. You know, you look at all of our movies that come out of Hollywood, and it's like it's always one person saving the universe, saving the day, saving anything. And it's always that one person that has a mystical calling of an avatar, you know, that little boy who thinks he's nothing. And oh no, you're the chosen one. You know, it's part of our mystique and our aesthetic in this country. So it's really difficult to fight against that. There's no need for that. That's just a lot of stress as you grow up and realize, you know, you're sitting there at 60, getting ready to retire from your cubicle job, and you're like, where's my special? What happened to my unique calling in life to save the world, to become the greatest singer, to become the greatest actor, to become the greatest engineer? What happened to it? And if you did happen to become the greatest of any of these and then you retire, oh, poor you. You've come from being so important, so recognized, so honored, and now you're retired and nobody cares. It's like, who are you? You're an old man who farted on the bus. You know, there's nothing special at all, you see. So if we pay attention to those things and run after those things and get caught in those structures of thinking, you know, at some point we have to unpackage it and we have to go through the pain of understanding. So cut it short. Don't work for 60 years for something that ultimately was not the point of life. You know, use your mind, remember, observe. You are not different from others. Most of their experiences are valid for you too. You know, the scriptures say that the man is blessed who can learn from the experiences of others. You know, he says, and yet there are those who have to go and taste it all for themselves, which is wonderful. You're going to learn the same thing, but you're going to have to suffer through a lot of stuff. So how blessed it is to be able to read a truth in the scripture and to be able to embrace it, to accept it without having to run out and prove it for yourself. You know, so take these things in there. Their experiences are valid for you too. Think clearly and deeply. Thinking clearly means to start from the 0 point each time. When you think of something, don't start from a bias. Don't start from a leaning. Start from a centered, clear perspective with no coloring in the water. You know, think clearly and think deeply, which means don't just think about it for a few seconds, right? This is why it's a good practice. Like, for the first time that I read this book, this Mr. Vedanta, the way that I fell in love with it was I did start to read it like a book. You know, the first time I sat down with it. And there is so much in every single question and answer couplet in there. If you read it like a book, you'll miss 96% of it, 96.5% of it. And if you actually pay attention, you'll learn something. And so I realized after a day or two that you can't read this book like a book. Like, you can't read a scripture like a book. You read a little bit, a small bit of it, and you sit there and you think about it for a while. Sometimes you have to think about things for months before you get an insight or an understanding of it. But that's one of the most, well, that probably betrays one of my desires, but it's one of the most wonderful feelings when you get that aha. You know, you understand something. And it's that joy of wrestling with what you don't know inside. And don't accept not knowing. Think about it, think about it, think about it. Watch it, ponder it, you know, and hold on to it until you know, until you've understood. So think clearly and deeply. Go into the entire structure of your desires and their ramifications. How are we doing on that? How are you doing on that, Jan? Have you gone in and to the entire structure of your desires and their ramifications yet? Have you finished that part?
I don't think I have any desires. I have one desire, and that is to see God before I leave my body. That's it. I'm too old for desires.
Yeah. I play with you and I get a ray of light. How beautiful that is. Thank you. That's marvelous. That's marvelous.
Yeah.
That's the right way. If you have no desires, you don't have to go into your mind and take apart their ramifications and their entire structure. Excellent. Excellent. I think you just gave us a secret here. Perfect. All right. Thank you. They are the most important part of your mental and emotional makeup and powerfully affect your actions. Remember, you cannot abandon what you do not know. To go beyond yourself, you must know yourself. Right? These desires that do hang on to us, these things that guide our life, this ignorance, you can't abandon what you do not know. They don't just disappear. It's like they disappear through discernment, through a constant combing of the mind and self. The knots are untangled. And that combing is just awareness. It's going in and observing clearly and deeply everything going on inside. Don't let the inside be covered by the outside. Don't let the noise of the outside be louder than the noise of your inside. Pay attention to what's going on inside, because that does powerfully affect how you experience this moment. If you can be free of desire, the moment is always beautiful. The moment is always content and always peaceful. If there are desires floating in there, go and see what their real name is. Go and sit with them and find out what the real desire is. Because Hafiz and Jesus and Swamiji all tell us that the real nature of desire is the name of God, right? And that it's your ignorance of the presence that takes manifestation as desires for objects, desires for things and conditions. But that if you discern all of those conditions and discern all of those objects, you will find the name of God tucked neatly inside. So, does someone have a question? Is that someone trying to ask something, or?
No, can I, Swami, I have appointment. Can I go?
Oh, naturally, Ma. Naturally. No, you can always come and go at free, with absolute freedom. No. Wonderful. I'm glad you were here, though, Prafula. Be well. All right. What does it mean to know myself? Oh, it's 10 a.m. What does it mean to know myself? By knowing myself, what exactly do I come to know? Maharaj, well, this is an infuriating answer. All that you are not. All that you are not. And so we're going to stop with that one. That's a meditation nugget right there. So what does it mean to know myself? By knowing myself, what exactly do I come to know? All that you are not. The hidden message in that is that you are not the particular. You are the universal, ever free, ever pure, ever beloved self, companion of the divine. This is what you are in that freedom. That's what you come to know. All right, we'll stop there today. We turn off the